LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 29th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political comedy show, a political commentary show for you all today. I do have a political comedy clip, sort of. It's on my main topic of the Omicron, or some people say Omicron. There seems to be a big fight on the pronunciation of this new COVID variant, Omicron variant, that came out of South Africa, and it sort of took over the news cycle. And I think that by the time you get finished watching all these clips, you're going to know a lot more about it, or what is known and what is not known. But one of the things that happened because of the onset or the discovery of this new variant is that Biden put a travel ban into effect. And that's and I'll cover that with some of the newsmaker clips, and it comes up in the news summaries. But the political comedy that I wanted to share with you all is this thing I've noticed on the right wing and with Fox News, that they never let one of their dishonest talking points die. There was this dishonest talking point from like January, February 2020. And Trump started telling this lie about it, that when he instituted the travel ban, Joe Biden claimed that it was xenophobic, and yet it saved all these lives. And actually, travel bans usually don't work that well. I said it then, I'll say it now when Biden's doing it. And that's kind of the joke, is that Fox News keeps that weird talking point alive that was never true. Here, I'm going to show you first from the panel discussion on Fox News Sunday yesterday. Chris Wallace wasn't there. It was Trace Gallagher, who was total partisan. I think I even showed a clip of him being partisan on inflation last week as my political comedy clip. Well, here he is talking to Karl Rove, and he's trying to be sort of even-handed, saying pushback from, the people said, lied and said that Biden called Trump's travel ban xenophobic, and there was pushback from the Biden campaign on that. What do you think, Karl? That's basically the first clip I'm going to show you, and then I'll explain why it's bogus after we watch together over here.
And that's a good point, Karl, and you can kind of expound on that if you would for me, because we're going to move subjects. But the whole idea here of a travel ban, coming in these South African countries, shouldn't, a lot of critics saying, hey, we need vaccines. We don't need to be isolated. We don't need these kind of travel bans. What we need is help from the United States. What do you make of the travel ban, considering that you go back to when President Trump initiated that travel ban, and there was a lot of, people saying that President Biden intimated that it was xenophobic of the president. Of course, the campaign pushed back on that. But what do you think of the ban, quickly, Karl?
Well, I think it's wise, but the problem for President Biden is he did politicize this in the campaign last year. He didn't intimate that it was an example of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear-mongering. Those were his exact words. And then we had vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris saying, if Donald Trump tells me that I need to take something, to take it, I won't take it, attacking the idea of a vaccine. So the politicization of the issue last year is an overhang. You're right. His numbers are so on COVID, but they used to be pretty darn good. They have declined over the course of the year, and part of it, I think, is that they made the mistake of politicizing it last year, and as a result, there's a political reaction to much of what he does this year. But there was the right thing to do, to have the travel ban. It may be temporary, as Dr. Collins suggested, but it was an important thing to do.
Yeah, Juan, President Biden is being forced.
And then they move on to the Remain in Mexico policy. They don't let Juan Williams try to do any factual correction there, and you got like a twofer there too. The first, the dishonest Republican talking point about Biden saying the travel ban was xenophobic, and then this thing where they say that, well, the coronavirus was politicized by the Democrats first because Vice President Kamala Harris said that if Trump said the vaccine was safe, she wouldn't believe it. But what you said is if Trump says it, she wouldn't believe it. She would only believe it if it came from the experts, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who worked for Trump, works for Biden. I'm going to have you a clip, Dr. Anthony Fauci, a couple clips of his boss, Dr. Francis Collins, also Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's a frequent CBS guest and on the board of Pfizer. They're all going to give their expertise. Those will be coming up. But on the travel ban, this is what Biden said. He said something like this at a speech in Iowa and then repeated it in a tweet. We are in the midst of a crisis with the coronavirus. We need to lead the way with science, not Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear-mongering. He is the worst possible person to lead our country through a global health emergency. So, do you see the words travel ban anywhere there? Any reference to the travel ban? Now, Biden did say that Trump was xenophobic around the time that Trump instituted the travel ban, but he never said the travel ban was xenophobic, and he never even came out against Trump's travel ban, that Trump kept saying saved all these lives, which it probably didn't, because, like I said, travel bans are not really that great a safety precaution, and I'll get to that when I get to the newsmakers talking about that. But just to put an extra point on it here, since I'm doing the show on Monday, I can show you clips from Monday. Here is White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, actually, I think maybe being a little too gentle with Fox News' Peter Doocy asking the same question over here.
Thank you, Jen. Before Joe Biden was president, he said that COVID travel restrictions on foreign countries were hysterical xenophobia and fear-mongering. So what changed?
Well, I would say first, to put it in full context, Peter, what the president was critical of was the way that the former president put out, I believe, a xenophobic tweet and how he called what he called the coronavirus and who he directed it at. The president has not been critical of travel restrictions. We have put those in place ourselves. We put them in place ourselves in the spring. But no, he does not believe. He believes we should follow the advice of health and medical experts. That's exactly what he did in putting in place these restrictions over the weekend.
Okay.
So there you go. Like I said, I don't think that Jen Psaki even was sufficiently confrontational about that bogus, because that's so old and discredited, that talking point, and yet that's the thing. That's why it's such a joke. You hear it over and over again. And if you want to see how on MSNBC on the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, they had on a Dr. Kavita Patel, who, you know, they don't switch sides just because now Biden's president instead of Trump. They also still believe the travel ban is bogus, and actually it's punitive against South Africa, which first I saw in the live comments. I was reading your live comments along the way, and I saw somebody say, sort of correct me, maybe I said it wrong. Where is it? David Forrester said first identified by South Africa, not necessarily from there. And that's true. And we shouldn't really be penalizing South Africa because they are so vigilant. And that's kind of the point that this Dr. Kavita Patel made on the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, which is kind of the antidote to that Fox News dishonesty that I wanted to play for you before I get to the rest of the program. Here it is from Sunday show yesterday over here.
But I want to get your thoughts on, because I think you alluded to this in your initial answer about the travel restrictions that are being put in place. And you have African nations now saying that they're being unfairly punished over the new variant. Mm-hmm. Are the travel bans an overreaction, do you think?
I do, but I'll also say that as a former policy person, what else can you do? And that becomes the answer, unfortunately, to a really bad question. I completely agree, Jonathan. I'm actually glad we have this Greek naming system because it's so much better than what we were saying before, you know, quote, South African variant. The only reason we know that this was in South Africa is because, let's just be candid, they're much better about global viral surveillance than almost any other country, including the United States. So we're penalizing the people that are doing the job that, frankly, I wish we could do. But if we had done a better job, almost every variant would be dubbed the United States variant, just because we would find it. And that's exactly what's happening with African nations. And I just want to put another kind of reminder. African nations, especially the 50 that are on most of the country's kind of, quote, red lists now for banning travel to and from, those are the countries that have had anywhere from 2 to 6% of their population vaccinated. And so this is definitely just this is what we were all worried about, kind of global scenarios with low vaccination countries kind of being a reservoir or a place for these variants to emerge. But we can only hold ourselves responsible for that. So instead of travel restrictions, I would love to see, Jonathan, much stricter testing requirements using PCR tests, because we can see this on a PCR test. We're seeing this strain on a PCR test. That's great. So it would be much more useful to have kind of mandatory PCR testing and to do a much better job on surveillance on our end, which I'm hoping our country is doing.
Dr. Patel, I'm telling you this.
And so there you have both a liberal station, I guess, if MSNBC is supposedly liberal, it's got the most liberal spin and the most liberal commentators, I guess. And Jonathan Capehart is definitely in that category, but still sticking to the same analysis that when Biden does it, the travel ban probably is not great. And also you hear Kavita Patel sticking up for South Africa. It's not just when Trump does something punitive against African countries that the people on the left stick up for the truth. And so there you heard the truth. The only thing, there, in a general sense, if the United States were better about distributing vaccines and the wealthy countries were, especially not just the United States, were better about distributing vaccines, then we might have to worry less about the development of these variants, because the more the virus replicates, the more variants you get. But there's a whole bunch of other factors. But when I get over to the clip from Scott Gottlieb, which is like clip number 12, you'll see that actually it's a distribution problem, not a... they have more vaccines than they can distribute in a lot of those countries, including South Africa. But anyway, that's my one criticism of what Dr. Kavita Patel said there. But I want to get to the news summaries. I have them from longest to shortest. I think the best one is CBS News Face the Nation, because they actually have a reporter in South Africa talking about a lot of the things going on there. And you'll actually see in this report, they talk about how the problem they have is with distribution and hesitancy, not so much with supply of vaccines. This is Debora Patta after an introduction from Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation for the first news summary yesterday over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. A week ago, much of the world had never heard of COVID's Omicron variant. 4 days ago, South African authorities alerted the World Health Organization that they detected a new COVID strain in a small number of individuals from nearby Botswana. Since then, reaction has been swift. On Friday, the WHO declared it a variant of concern, citing evidence of increased transmissibility. It has since been detected on at least 4 continents, with new cases detected this morning in Australia and France. The WHO also asked countries to avoid imposing travel bans to contain the spread, but thus far, that advice seems to be going unheeded as countries from the U.S. to Europe to East Asia restrict travel to and from Southern Africa. We begin today with CBS News foreign correspondent Debora Patta, who's in Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've been here before. A pandemic-weary world plunged into uncertainty with the discovery of a new variant. Omicron has a worrying number of mutations, over 30, that scientists fear could make it more transmissible and vaccine-resistant.
The first time I saw it I just saw the mutations and I didn't quite believe it. In fact, I thought we weren't doing something right.
Anne van Gotberg of South Africa's National Institute for Communicable Diseases says scientists should know within the next 14 days just how dangerous Omicron is. Cases are slowly rising in South Africa, but are still very low, sitting at just over 3,200 nationwide. But it's put the rest of the world on edge. The arrival of the new variant, Europe was already the epicenter of an alarming surge in cases.
Go.
Terrified of a repeat of spring, which saw the Delta variant spread with lethal speed, one nation after another has shut its doors to countries across southern Africa. The US is prohibiting foreign travellers from South Africa and 7 other African nations from entering its borders, while Israel has taken a hard line, banning all foreign nationals from entering the country for 2 weeks. In the Netherlands, at least 61 people who arrived on 2 flights from South Africa have tested positive for COVID, 13 infected by the new Omicron strain.
There is bitter anger here over the hasty travel bans. South Africa says the country is being punished for its excellent science and ability to spot variants quickly.
The US has praised South Africa for its transparency, but that hasn't helped smooth over smouldering resentment amongst many Africans who believe they are bearing the brunt of wealthy nations' decision to hoard the lion's share of vaccines.
Is Omicron the price the world pays for not having global vaccine access?
So I think, yes, it should remind us that it may have played a role and that we should be making vaccines accessible to all populations throughout the world.
In South Africa, Omicron has shown up mainly in young adults, a group that has the lowest vaccination rate. But although doses were slow to arrive in this country, they are now widely available here. Vaccine hesitancy and difficulty accessing remote regions have complicated the rollout. Elsewhere on the continent, there are still desperate shortages. Less than 7% have been fully vaccinated, and many health workers have not received a single jab.
It's Debora Patta reporting in Johannesburg. We go now to Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's a former FDA commissioner.
And I will have a clip of Dr. Scott Gottlieb coming up talking about problems with vaccine distribution and problems with travel bans. But now I want to get to the Fox News Sunday news summary, where they actually have, because they're so obsessed with their travel ban talking point, I guess you'll see Trace Gallagher start saying that the breaking news is the travel ban resulting from the Omicron variant. You'll see Jacqui Heinrich, who takes over the report, the Fox News Sunday news summary. It almost sounds like she's going to say something good about the Biden administration, that they moved quickly, but then they waited. But anyway, I kind of pre-criticized the clip as usual. I'll talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News. The Biden administration has ordered new travel restrictions from South Africa and 7 other countries starting tomorrow in response to a new coronavirus variant. World health officials have designated the variant Omicron and have warned against overreaction. But its detection has sparked a new wave of global anxiety as cases pop up in multiple countries just days after first being identified. In a moment, we'll ask the head of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, what we know so far about the threat of Omicron. But first, let's turn to Jacqui Heinrich. She's traveling with the president in Nantucket with more on the Biden administration's response. Jacqui.
Trace, there was quick action from the White House in announcing those travel restrictions, but less urgency in imposing them, leaving an entire weekend until they take effect. President Biden said that was his medical team's advice.
President Biden urging Americans to get vaccinated and, if eligible, get booster shots after shutting down travel to 8 African countries to keep COVID variant Omicron from spreading.
We always talk about whether this is about freedom. I think it's a patriotic responsibility.
The CDC says so far it hasn't tracked any cases of Omicron in the U.S., but White House top doctor Anthony Fauci says it may already be here.
I would not be surprised if it is. It almost invariably is ultimately going to go essentially all over.
No more travel restrictions are expected yet.
We'll take it one step at a time, but as of now, we've done what we believe is necessary.
But other countries are ramping up efforts to contain the virus. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson imposing stricter rules for masking and testing international travelers after 2 cases were detected.
We will require all contacts of those who test positive with a suspected case of Omicron to self-isolate for 10 days, regardless of your vaccination status.
Israel shut down its borders to foreigners entirely, spooked over a single Omicron case. Vaccine manufacturers are already mobilizing. Pfizer says a shot for a vaccine-resistant strain will take 100 days. Moderna, already testing a high-dose booster, is also working on an Omicron-specific shot.
President Biden says no more vaccine mandates are ahead at this time, but Omicron's emergence is adding urgency to the administration's vaccination efforts, and it's happening against a backdrop of sinking poll numbers, plunging markets, and multiple year-end deadlines in Congress. Trace?
A lot of changes. Jacqui Heinrich reporting from Nantucket. Jacqui, thank you. And joining us now, National Institutes of Health Director Dr. Francis Collins. Doctor, welcome.
And I will have Dr. Francis Collins coming up. I can't believe with all the Fox News I watched last week where during Thanksgiving they kept talking about how Biden was staying at this billionaire's compound in Nantucket, but they didn't mention it. I don't know, they're getting soft on Fox News Sunday. But anyway, I kind of pre-criticized that clip. I'm going to juxtapose it with the previous news summary, and the next three are shorter. Meet the Press had a short news summary for some reason this week. Chuck Todd basically introducing the same facts that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Well, a good Sunday morning. Hope you're enjoying the rest of your Thanksgiving Day weekend. Well, it appears the country and the world may be suffering from its own version of long COVID. Each pause in cases seems to be followed by a spike. And now there's Omicron. This is the name of a troubling new coronavirus variant that the WHO is calling a variant of concern. The first one they've labeled that since the Delta variant. We know how that turned out. This was first identified in southern Africa. But as we've learned, when a variant shows up anywhere, it winds up everywhere. The reaction so far has been swift, despite real uncertainty over how serious this variant actually is. There's been jitters on Wall Street over the news, and it caused the Dow to drop more than 900 points on Friday, the single worst day of the year. All this comes amid a sharp rise in cases in the U.S. and across Europe, and this is pre-Omicron. Here at home, the 7-day average of cases has grown since the end of the summer wave, with the recent spike especially sharp in the Northeast and Midwest as more people go inside due to the cold weather. Ultimately, this is also a political problem. President Biden ran on taming the pandemic, and he prematurely declared independence from the virus back in July. At the same time, we could see a backlash against all those Republican politicians who've been fighting mandates and playing down the need for vaccines. So where are we headed? Well, joining me now is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. It is Dr. Anthony Fauci, and of course, he's the president's chief advisor on COVID. Dr. Fauci, well,
there's some weird audio glitch in the last 10 seconds there. I don't know what that was, but I think that was a reasonable news summary. No pre-recorded package, just the live introduction. I'm not sure why. Maybe Omicron was too breaking a story, or I don't know. Maybe, I don't know why NBC News didn't have a big pre-recorded package for Chuck Todd to introduce there, but that was the NBC News summary. Certainly not as good as CBS, not as biased as Fox News. And now at the two shortest ones, the CNN and ABC, both under a minute. First, here's CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash yesterday, giving you sort of the same facts in shorter fashion over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is in a state of uncertainty. As we were giving thanks around the dinner table that the end of the pandemic could be in sight, a new variant was beginning to send shockwaves around the world. The stock market tumbling, and beginning tomorrow, the U.S. will restrict travel from 8 African nations. The CDC says no cases of the Omicron variant have been identified in the U.S. yet, but Dr. Anthony Fauci says he wouldn't be surprised if it's already here. Denmark just confirmed 2 Omicron cases from passengers arriving by plane from South Africa. And right now, researchers are racing to find out more about how this variant behaves, how aggressively it could spread, whether it is like the Delta variant or something worse. And maybe most importantly, whether the vaccines we all have now, or should have, will stand up to it. I want to go straight to the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins. Doctor.
And I will have a clip of Dr. Francis Collins both talking to Dana Bash and then talking to Trace Gallagher on Fox News. And those will both be after I have Dr. Anthony Fauci talking to George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But first, I want to show you the George Stephanopoulos news summary, the shortest of them all, just briefly summarizing the same facts over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this Thanksgiving Sunday, a new COVID strain is raising alarms around the world. The Omicron variant, first discovered in southern Africa, has now spread across Europe to Australia and Hong Kong. Global markets plunged when the news broke. Countries are imposing new travel bans, the most restrictive in Israel, which has closed its borders to all foreigners for 2 weeks. Here in the U.S., New York's governor has already declared a state of emergency. The big questions now, how dangerous is this new variant? Will it evade our defenses? Are new lockdowns and vaccine mandates coming as we approach the third year of this pandemic? So we begin this morning with the president's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And I'm going to show you that clip next, Dr. Anthony Fauci. But I heard that a couple times. You know, I watch all these clips 3 times. First when I watch the show, then when I'm capturing the clip, and then the third time with you. And just that one gets more and more depressing, where they keep talking about where George Stephanopoulos says the third year of the pandemic. But that, yeah, we're a couple more months and we're starting year number 3 of the pandemic, and that's pretty depressing. But like I said at the beginning of the program, you're about to hear from the experts, like what you really need to know about Omicron, or what they know and what they don't know. Here you're going to hear in this next clip, George Stephanopoulos asked Dr. Anthony Fauci if it's more transmissible, probably if it causes more severe disease. There's some anecdotal evidence that it doesn't, but that's from the people who've been infected are mostly young in South Africa, so it might just be because they're young, they have less severe disease, so that's unknown. And then if the vaccines are going to work against it, unknown. And then you'll even hear Anthony Fauci talk about the whole travel ban thing, that they don't really work, but they might slow things down a little bit. And now I've sort of given away all the answers, but why would you accept those answers from me? You should accept them from the man who represents science, didn't he? Well, he had this extended CBS News Face the Nation interview where he... By the way, CBS News Face the Nation, there's a link down under sources in the video description of this video where you can go to their YouTube channel and you can watch that entire Anthony Fauci interview where he laughs about Ted Cruz saying he should be prosecuted, and says, Ted Cruz, what about January 6th? And there's all sorts of political stuff from Anthony Fauci. But and he also says, people attacking me are attacking science. He's done that before, and I think that just drives his critics crazy. But in this next clip, I think he is speaking within his expertise and giving really good information that I kind of spoiled by giving the answers, or the lack of answers on some of them, that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch George Stephanopoulos asking and getting good information from Anthony Fauci over here.
This morning, have we detected the Omicron variant here in the United States yet?
No, we have not, George, and we have a pretty good surveillance system. But as we all know, when you have a virus that has already gone to multiple countries, inevitably it will be here. The question is, will we be prepared for it? And the preparation that we have ongoing for what we're doing now with the Delta variant just needs to be revved up. And that's the bottom line of that, is the preparation by getting more and more people vaccinated and getting the fully vaccinated boosted. That's what we can be doing. But we are on the lookout for this. The CDC has a good surveillance system. So if and when, and it's going to be when it comes here, hopefully we will be ready for it by enhancing our capabilities via vaccine, masking, all the things that we do and should be doing.
Let's go through what we know and what we don't know about the Omicron variant. Number one, is it more transmissible than other variants?
It appears to be, George. It has the molecular characteristics that would strongly suggest that it would be more transmissible. It has a bunch of mutations, a disturbingly large number of mutations in the spike protein, which is the business end of the virus, which really binds, particularly in one particular component of that spike that binds to the receptors in your body, in your nose, in your nasopharynx, and in your lung. The mutations would strongly suggest that it would be more transmissible and that it might evade some of the protection of monoclonal antibodies and convalescent plasma, and perhaps even antibodies that are induced by vaccine. If you look at the pattern of what's going on right now in Southern Africa, particularly in South Africa. When you have a spike of infections, they are very heavily weighted towards this new variant, the Omicron. And therefore, you have to presume that it has a good degree of transmissibility advantage, which is very likely what is going on right now in Southern Africa and would likely be going on in other countries as it spreads.
Do we know if it causes more severe disease?
Great question, George, and we don't know that. In fact, we were on the phone with our South African colleagues who have been incredibly good about being so transparent about what's going on there on Friday, and we're meeting with them again today, a little bit later on in a couple of hours, to try and find out if the cases that they've identified that clearly are caused by this variant, what is the level of severity in that? Hopefully it will be light, but you know, South Africa has a relatively small proportion of the population that's vaccinated. So you got to take that into the equation when you're trying to figure out where this virus is really going and what its impact is going to be. But bottom line, George, we don't know yet what the level of severity will be.
You mentioned the possibility that it can evade our defenses. What do we know about how resistant it is to the current vaccines?
We don't have a definitive answer to that, George, and we will know that likely within a period of about 2 weeks. And the way you find that out is you get the virus and you put it either as the whole virus or as what we call a pseudovirus, and you take antibodies or serum from people who've been vaccinated, and you determine if those antibodies can neutralize the virus. That whole process is already underway right now, and hopefully we'll be able to determine. When you talk about that, George, it really is important to point out that when you have a high level of antibodies, the way you get with the boosters that we've been doing lately in this country and elsewhere, you lift up the level of the neutralizing antibodies high enough that it generally crosses over and covers several of the variants, including the Delta variant, which makes us even more emphatic in saying even with a variant that we don't know yet the full impact that it's going to have on protection against vaccine-induced antibodies, get boosted, get vaccinated, and you're going to bring that level right up. I don't think there's any possibility that this could completely evade any protection by a vaccine. It may diminish it a bit, but that's the reason why you boost.
And what do we know about whether vaccines can then be tailored to address this variant?
The companies are already doing that as you and I are speaking, George. So there are two ways to approach it. There's to get the level of the regular type of classic antibodies that we've been dealing with right now, get it at a high level, and or develop a variant-specific boost, a variant-specific vaccine. And we've been on the phone with all of the companies right now, and they're already in the process of doing that.
We're seeing these travel bans. Are they going to make any difference?
You know, it will slow things down, George. Travel bans, when you have a highly transmissible virus, never completely would get the virus to prevent it from coming into the country. No way that's going to happen. But what you can do is you can delay it enough to get us better prepared. And that's the thing that people need to understand. If you're going to do the travel ban the way we've done now and that we're implementing right now, utilize the time that you're buying to fill in the gaps. And by time biding, you learn more about the virus, you learn what its relationship is to the antibodies induced by vaccines, and above all, you use this time to really, really put your pedal to the floor and get people vaccinated and get people boosted. It's going to give us a period of time to enhance our preparedness. I think we have to give kudos to the South Africans for being so transparent so quickly by giving us this information. So they're giving us time to be better prepared.
So he gives kudos to the South Africans, but he also supports the travel ban that have upset the South Africans and a lot of other Southern African countries. But, I mean, I think that is the most truthful way, or the most you can say about travel bans, that they may slow things down. And sometimes they can speed things up because there can be like a rush to the exits before they go into effect, and because they don't include U.S. citizens can still come back, so they can also push a bunch of U.S. citizens to come back who might not have come back. And so that can actually increase the spread. So there are actually, I think that maybe Anthony Fauci there was being too positive, or saying that travel bans are more effective than they actually are. I'm not a big fan of travel bans, but I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't trust Anthony Fauci. They think he's evil and he lied and he's involved in the creation of COVID and, you know, the Wuhan lab or what, I don't know. There's like all sorts of weird, crazy conspiracy theories and the whole like attack from Rand Paul. And I was talking about how you can see Anthony Fauci talk about that more on, if you go down to the link to CBS News Face the Nation and watch his whole interview there. But for those of you who don't believe it from Anthony Fauci, I'm going to give you pretty much the same facts from Dr. Francis Collins, who is Dr. Anthony Fauci's boss. And this is Dana Bash over on CNN State of the Union, basically asking my title question, you know, why, or almost the title question of my video, why are the experts so worried about Omicron? And I think one thing that I didn't mention in terms of the facts that you learn about Omicron and about vaccinations, you heard Anthony Fauci in that last clip say that the third shot, the booster, and I see a lot of people in the live comments talking about whether they've got the booster. Apparently that booster really brings up your antibodies and in a way that can protect you against a whole bunch of different kind of spike proteins, even though you get a vaccine for a specific spike protein. It's that third shot apparently really brings those antibodies up. And I think Dr. Francis Collins in this next clip makes that even clearer, talking to Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union yesterday in a clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So what is it about this variant that has experts so worried?
I think the main thing that has us focused on this and has caused a lot of us to be sort of 24/7 on Zoom calls for the last 4 days is that it has so many mutations. Omicron has more than 50 variants that make it different than the original virus, including more than 30 that are in the spike protein. I brought my little model along in case people have forgotten what this looks like. So these are those spike proteins that sit on the outside of the virus and enable it to get inside your cells. And the Omicron version of that, because of those changes, is going to have a different shape. And of course, that's also what the antibodies are directed against. So the question is, will the antibodies generated by the vaccines that we have all had or should have had, will that enable us to be protected against this virus? I think there's good reasons to think it will probably be okay, but we need to know the real answers to that, and that's going to take 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, that's good to know that you think we probably would be okay. In a statement on Friday, Moderna said, quote, the combination of mutations represents a significant potential risk to accelerate the waning of natural and vaccine-induced immunity. Can you explain what that means? And is it possible that the Omicron variant is what scientists like you called an escape variant?
It's possible, but again, based on what we've learned so far with Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta, the vaccines, which are generated against the original virus, still work. And the boosters work particularly well. Dana, this is an important point. For people who are listening who haven't yet gotten boosted but did get their original vaccine and who are eligible now, this is another reason to do that now, because the booster, it basically enlarges the capacity of your immune system to recognize all kinds of different spike proteins it's never seen. This is a great day to go and get boosted, or to find out how to do so at vaccines.gov. But yes, we worry that in the worst case, you might have a virus that is so different that the vaccines really don't enable you to have protection. That's the kind of thing we need to check out as quickly as possible. We'll get some sense of that already from what's happening in South Africa, because about 37% of South Africans are vaccinated. We should be able to find out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, is the protection that they're having somewhat better than the unvaccinated people? That data is going to start to emerge. And we'll be able to work in the laboratory and ask, if you took serum from somebody who's been vaccinated, does it actually neutralize that virus in the lab? And that'll take also another 2 or 3 weeks. So stay tuned. We're going to get better information about this. There's no reason to panic, but there's a great reason to go get boosted.
Have you seen anything to suggest that this new variant causes more serious illness than previous strains?
Well, that's another really important question. How severe would it be? We have no data so far to suggest that it would be. There's even a bit of a report from South Africa that maybe people with this are milder than the usual case, but they're mostly young people who have mild illness anyway. So I would say we just don't know. We do think it's more contagious when you look at how rapidly it's spread through multiple districts in South Africa. It has the earmarks, therefore, of being particularly likely to spread from one person to another.
Well, that was one of the things that got everybody so concerned about Delta, was because it was more contagious than the original novel coronavirus. Right. Do you think that the new variant Omicron is even more contagious than Delta?
We don't know yet. It certainly shows the signs of being able to spread quickly. What we don't know is whether it can compete with Delta. You know, we've had occasions before where we thought a particular variant was going to take over in the United States. Remember Beta, that's B1351? It never really took off because Delta was so incredibly effective at spreading that it couldn't compete. We don't know what Omicron will look like if it gets to our country, and I hope it doesn't, but it's fairly likely we'll see cases. Well, will it be able to compete, or will it fizzle?
Do you think it's already here in the United States?
We have no evidence that it is, so I'm on the fence about that. We will find out, because CDC is looking at tens of thousands of viral isolates every week, and so we're going to find out if it's here.
So we'll find out if it's here, and within a couple weeks we'll find out the answers to some of those other questions for sure about whether it's more transmissible, whether it causes more severe disease. I kind of talked about that clip before I showed it, pre-criticized it as usual, and I do think that Dr. Francis Collins had a better way of emphasizing the way boosters sort of increase your immune response, and widen it, like even beyond a natural immune response to a specific, the people who are naturally immune who've caught COVID and recovered and don't get long COVID. I mean, that is certainly not the best way to get immunity because it's a lot more dangerous than getting vaccinated. There are a lot more adverse results, not just deaths, but severe symptoms and hospitalization, and then the whole long COVID, and some people have long-term fatigue and long-term breathing problems and lung scarring. And so, yeah, I saw there was Representative Nancy Mace was saying how she thought that getting COVID was the better way than getting vaccinated, or something close to that on Fox News yesterday, and that's just crazy. And the vaccination is, especially the third shot, the booster, from what I'm hearing from Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins, it sounds like it gives you a much wider ability to fight off all sorts of different coronaviruses with different kinds of spike proteins. I mean, I guess we'll find that out in terms of Omicron, or if there's going to have to be a new vaccine. But one other thing, I noticed Francis Collins in that last clip, he said the vaccination rate in South Africa was 37%, which I Googled it and I saw that it was 24%, because in this next clip, you're going to see Trace Gallagher asking Francis Collins about the travel ban and about the vaccination rates in various African countries, and he'll say the vaccination rate in South Africa is 24%. But in that last clip, Francis Collins said 37%, and he never really corrects him. And then this is sort of it's kind of I don't even really understand the question that Trace Gallagher is asking at the beginning of this clip, because he talks about the vaccination rates and then travel bans, and then shouldn't we have more travel bans, or I don't even know what he's asking. And then he also does this terrible question about Florida, that they keep bringing this up on Fox News about how the case rate has gone down in Florida, and people were criticizing Governor Ron DeSantis, who is one of the front runners. If Trump doesn't run for president in 2024, Ron DeSantis is one of the front runners. And it's such a disingenuous question. And I mean, Francis Collins knows the answer. I don't know why he doesn't maybe he's not really paying attention to the question, but that I've talked about this many times, that like when we get spikes in COVID in the United States, it's basically when people have to go indoors. So in Florida, in the summer, it gets really, really hot and people go indoors for the air conditioning. And then in the winter, it's actually nice and mild and people tend to not be indoors as much. And so right now, we're getting into the winter, COVID rates are going down in the South, where people are inside in the summer when it's too hot, and in like the Midwest and the Northeast and other places when people are coming inside because it's cold. But then on Fox News, they're like using the seasonal changes in the COVID pandemic as like evidence that Governor Ron DeSantis has been unfairly maligned by the media. It's ridiculous. But once again, I criticized the clip, but this is Francis Collins talking to Trace Gallagher. Oh, did you hear Sandy barking off in the distance? I saw in the live comments people were also asking about Dash. Dash is still with us, and I appreciated the Sexy Bob super chat contribution for Dash. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a clip of Dash at the end, and I'll explain what's been going on with Dash. And I guess while I'm playing this clip, I will also let Sandy out. It's getting too close to dinner time for Sandy, I guess. But anyway, here is Trace Gallagher doing some biased questioning of Dr. Francis Collins on Fox News Sunday yesterday over here.
Collins, let's move on now. The president has put a travel ban in 8 South African countries. Let's put those on the screen. Here's the vaccination rates of those countries. You can see they go all the way up to 27% in Lesotho and then all the way down to 3.2% in Malawi, which is extraordinarily low. The former Biden advisor, Dr. Zeke Emanuel, said the following, and I'm quoting here: restricting travel is going to slow. It's coming, not stop it from coming. The fact that it's coming here is inevitable. The environment in which it comes may not be inevitable. We can alter the environment. And if it's just a case of trying to slow it down, Dr. Collins, why not put in place more travel bans? Because the people in South Africa, some of the government officials there, feel like they're being singled out, feel like this is a little bit discriminatory against them.
Well, I think it is a difficult decision, Trace, and this is just the best advice of the public health experts, and you'll notice other countries like the UK and the EU are doing the same. Keep in mind, of course, that everybody who's a foreign traveler coming to the U.S. has to have a test 3 days in advance if you're vaccinated, 1 day in advance if you're unvaccinated. So we are screening travelers from everywhere. But given the current circumstance, out of an abundance of caution, seeing that this is the most serious new variant that we've seen in several months, it made sense for at least for a temporary measure. We're not going to say this is going to be there for a long time, to block travel from those countries where we know Omicron is already spreading.
Yeah, we talked about the vaccination rates in some of these South African countries. I want to put up the vaccination rates and booster rates from this country, Doctor, because it's kind of a fascinating look here. 59.1% vaccination, that's fully vaccinated. 19.1% of boosters. And the question is, will the vaccines need to be modified for Omicron? I mean, and if they do need to be modified, why would people get the booster tomorrow when they might have to get a brand new booster in 30 days, in 2 months?
Well, Trace, I'm glad we're talking about this. For Americans listening to this right now, this is an action you can take if you're not vaccinated yet or if you haven't gotten your booster. It's clear that in all the previous examples of variants, the vaccines have worked to provide protection, and the boosters have provided especially strong protection against things like Delta. Given that history, we expect that most likely the current vaccines will be sufficient to provide protection, and especially the boosters will give that additional layer of protection, because there's something about the booster that causes your immune system to really expand its capacity against all kinds of different spike proteins, even ones it hasn't seen before. So please, Americans, if you're one of those folks who's sort of waiting to see, this would be a great time to sign up, get your booster. Or if you haven't been vaccinated already, get started. Omicron is one more reason to do this. Now, if we need a new vaccine designed specifically against Omicron, Pfizer and Moderna are already already in the process of designing that, but that's going to be at least 3 months or so to come into being if we have to do it. All of us hope we don't need to do that.
So you think it will be modified, but for now, for the time being, the vaccines we have are working just fine. I want to put up the 4 states and their vaccination rates because that really kind of gives us an idea here of where we're going. You see Michigan, 54% vaccination rate, a new case rate of 59%. Maine, kind of the same thing, very high vaccination rate, high new cases. New York, 68-22. You look at the bottom there, Dr. Collins, you have Florida, 61% vaccination rate, down in cases. You know, it was only a couple of months ago the media was giving Florida an awful hard time saying that Ron DeSantis' policies were all wrong. What's going on here? Why are some of the states with some of the most severe lockdowns and mandates doing poorly, and states like Florida that have virtually no mandates doing quite well?
Well, it all comes down to who is actually getting the disease, and especially who's getting sick enough to be in the hospital or to die. Keep in mind, getting a mild case of the illness certainly happens as breakthroughs from the vaccinated folks, although boosters really help prevent that. But if you're talking about who's in the hospital and who's dying, those are still the unvaccinated people, and there are lots of those in all the states you just mentioned. If there's a lesson here, it's, come on, America, we have missed the chance to be at a much higher level of vaccination across the country that would put us in a stronger position. For all those reasons of misinformation that people have heard, we've not done what we should have done to protect ourselves. If Omicron is one more wake-up call, then let's wake up. And come on, America, you can do this. These vaccines are safe. They're effective. People have been using them for more than a year. 200 million people plus have gotten injected. These are something you want for yourself, your family, your community.
Yeah, Dr. Collins, I've got about a minute left here. You talk a lot about these antiviral pills, Merck and Pfizer, and some of them say, look, these are game changers. These pills are game changers. Do you worry that when they come out with these new pills and they are as effective as we're being told, that it will lessen people's, need or hurry to get this vaccine?
It does worry me, Trace, although it would not be a rational conclusion, because these are pills that you would take if you're shown to be infected. You don't want to be infected. Take the analogy. Do you want to wear your seatbelt or just forget that and count on the emergency room to patch up your broken bones? I think the seatbelt's a better deal. The vaccines are your seatbelt. Use them. If for some reason you still get sick, it'll be great to have these antivirals. I am tickled to see them emerging. Molnupiravir, the Merck drug, will be debated on Tuesday. The Pfizer drug, Paxlovid, is not far behind. It's great that we're going to have something like that, but that is not the whole answer. Prevention is better than treatment.
Yeah, it is a bit of good news. Dr. Francis Collins, thank you for joining us, sir. We appreciate it.
Glad to be with you.
So, yeah, that's another weird Fox News talking point, and that's something Ron DeSantis has done where he, in Florida, the governor of Florida, where he's promoted treatments rather than vaccination. And, one thing I noticed, maybe it took me the third time watching to get, I criticized Dr. Francis Collins for not pointing out the reason that the cases are going down in Florida is because it's moved from where people are inside in the summer to where they're inside in the winter or whatever, as I was talking about before the clip. But what he was saying was that cases aren't really necessarily the best, the spike in cases. It may even be a spike amongst vaccinated people, but who aren't getting hospitalized and aren't dying. And so maybe hospitalization and deaths are what you should be looking at. And Florida has not, overall, has not done well in either of those categories. Although they may be doing well right now because of the seasonal variation I was talking about before. Although, what he really should have said is not because it's true, but it would have totally blown Trace Gallagher's mind. He should have said, well, the reason they have more cases is because there's more testing. If there wasn't so much testing, there wouldn't be any cases. Anyway, that's just your little flashback to the Trump years that, I'm sorry, but it just also occurred to me when I was watching Dr. Francis Collins' answer there. But then this final clip I have on this topic, and by the way, I didn't mention this, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I do have one off-topic clip. Chuck Todd not really doing a good job of cross-examining Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi about this case, a Mississippi law that outlaws abortion after 15 weeks that's going to be argued in the Supreme Court on Wednesday. I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I don't think Chuck Todd did a great job of cross-examining he had some good prepared questions, but didn't really cross-examine what Tate Reeves said. That's the clip after next, and that's off topic. It's not on Omicron, it's on abortion, but before I get to that, here's Dr. Scott Gottlieb still saying travel bans aren't great, and also talking about the problems with vaccine hesitancy and distribution, not with supply of vaccine in South Africa, in the final newsmaker clip on my main topic of how worrying is the Omicron variant over here.
Well, the WHO said the first confirmed case was November the 9th, as far as their tracking. What does shutting off travel from Southern Africa accomplish if this is already on 4 continents?
Well, look, I think it's unfortunately very punitive, and we could have accomplished a lot of what we're seeking to accomplish with these restrictions, perhaps by increasing requirements on travelers, requiring that they be vaccinated and also have a negative PCR test in the last 24 hours. These kinds of restrictions are going to reduce introductions. They could buy us perhaps a couple of weeks, but we didn't need to close off travel. And unfortunately, we're punishing South Africa for doing the right thing and telling other nations that, who want to sequence strains that they find, that we're giving them real disincentive to do that, because if they turn over new variants, this is what's going to happen to them. So this is a bad step, I think, from a policy standpoint.
Another policy question. We heard from our correspondent in South Africa that vaccines are actually widely available there. They're just not being distributed, that there is hesitation. We're hearing from the administration a call for donation of more doses and a call for lifting protections off of vaccine makers. Is that a different solution to the problem that exists?
Well, look, I could tell you that 5 of the 8 countries that now fell under this travel ban imposed by the Biden administration have told Pfizer to either slow down or stop shipping vaccines because they haven't been able to distribute what they've received. That represents about 95% of the population that now falls under these travel bans in Africa. It's South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, and Malawi. And I can also tell you that with respect to South Africa has also told J&J and Pfizer, the 2 companies that are distributing vaccine there, to also throttle shipments or stop shipments because they have an excess of vaccine. Mm-hmm. They now have 16 million doses in that country that they haven't been able to distribute in a population of 60 million people. Of the 19 million doses that Pfizer has sent, of the 30 million doses Pfizer sent to South Africa, only 19 have been used to date.
Okay, it seems like that's a distribution problem, and that's something we're going to have to follow up on. Dr. Gottlieb, thank you so much.
So yeah, I just wanted to play that clip because I think it's kind of a capper on some of the discussions I was showing earlier, both about the ineffectiveness of travel bans and then also about the vaccination rate in South Africa and whether it's a vaccine supply problem or a vaccine distribution or maybe even a vaccine hesitancy problem. And that's one thing they never really show in the clips that talked about it, is it they talked about problems getting the vaccines out to like the hinterlands in South Africa, but also vaccine hesitancy, and they don't say where the biggest problem is. But anyway, that is the last of the newsmaker clips on my main topic. But as I said, I did want to show you this little over 6-minute clip of Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves getting sort of cross-examined on his state's law that's going before the Supreme Court this week, or being argued this week before the Supreme Court, oral arguments, and then it's probably going to be one of the last opinions coming out in like sometime in June, late June, where they may overturn Roe v. Wade. Like I was saying, Mississippi has this law that outlaws abortion after 15 weeks. And you'll hear Tate Reeves make some constitutional arguments here. I've got my Constitution right here, and I'm going to tell you one very specific thing he says that's bogus, that Chuck Todd does not cross-examine him on. And it has to do with the 9th Amendment. If you have your Constitution, open it up to the 9th Amendment in the Bill of Rights. That's the thing that I wouldn't go so far as to say Tate Reeves violates the 9th Amendment, but he his argument violates the 9th Amendment anyway. But Chuck Todd has some good questions, or he has like this stupid question. It's sort of like a weird gotcha. You know, they say that when you use analogies, most of the time, you just obfuscate things and make analogies aren't really very good arguments. And the first part of the interview with Governor Tate Reeves was about Omicron and vaccine mandates. And at the end of the answer, right before this clip begins, he's talking about, giving people the freedom to choose, their body, their choice, and all that kind of stuff for the vaccine. And Chuck Todd picks up on that question, but the answer that he's going to get from Tate Reeves is so obvious. So expected, and Chuck Todd has no real response for it, and he lets him get away with making arguments about the Constitution that aren't true. And anyway, I think I've sufficiently pre-criticized the clip that I can now play the final newsmaker clip and then talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So let me switch gears here. Speaking of some individual freedom that I think people might have a difference of opinion on. This week, the Supreme Court's going to hear some oral arguments in the case involving a Mississippi law that would ban all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Do you hope that the Supreme Court makes this law legal within the framework of Roe v. Wade or overturns Roe v. Wade completely? I know your views on Roe v. Wade. You'd like to see it overturned, or you believe it was wrongly decided. Do you think it needs to be overturned for this law to be enacted, or do you think they can redefine Roe v. Wade to allow this law to be enacted?
Well, that's a complicated question, but clearly I think that this law can be enacted within a changing confinement of Roe v. Wade, but I also believe that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided. I believe in a simple reading of the United States Constitution that when Roe was decided in 1973, there is no fundamental right in our United States Constitution to an abortion. And furthermore, Chuck, I believe very strongly that if you read the Constitution, there is nowhere in the Constitution that prohibits individual states like Mississippi, to limit access to abortions. And so I think Roe was wrongly decided. I also believe that some 20 years later, in 1992, Casey was incorrectly decided. Yeah. And if you look at the Casey ruling, what you find, in my opinion, is a ruling that was not based upon fundamentals of the Constitution, but a ruling that was determined based upon what the perceived political perception was at that time. And I don't think the judicial branch of government should ever allow politics to play into their decision making, and I think they did in Casey.
If Roe is overturned to allow your law to be enacted, do you plan on pursuing even more restrictions, or are you going to stop at 15 weeks? Because there's a tighter restriction at one time, a trigger law that was on the books. Do you want to see something like that if Roe is overturned?
Well, I certainly would like to do everything we can to protect unborn children, but let's put this in perspective, Chuck. You know, in Europe, there are 42 countries that allow elective abortions. If Roe is overturned and this 15-week ban in Mississippi is allowed to go into effect, Mississippi will still have a law on the books in which 39 countries, 39 out of 42 in Europe, have more restrictive abortion laws than what I believe to be one of the most conservative states in the United States. 39 countries in Europe restrict abortions earlier than 15 weeks. And so the reality is that the U.S. abortion laws are not in conformity or are not even in the realm of what we see in other parts of the country. When you look at, for instance, abortion laws in California and New York, they are much more similar to those abortion laws in China and North Korea than they are to Europe or many other countries around the world.
I want to play something that you said about the vaccine mandate and ask you why the same philosophy doesn't apply here. Let me play what you said.
This is a power grab by the federal government. We've seen this time and time again by the Biden administration, and now we're seeing their strong desire to try to make decisions on behalf of individual Americans. We believe in freedom and individual liberty.
Freedom and individual liberty. Why should the state of Mississippi tell a woman what they should do with their body. Why shouldn't they have that individual freedom on their body, particularly in the first 20 weeks?
Well, this is a prime example, and the far left loves to scream, "My body, my choice." And what I would submit to you, Chuck, is they absolutely ignore the fact that in getting an abortion, there is an actual killing of an innocent unborn child that is in that womb. Here's what we know about babies that are 15 weeks. We know that they have a heartbeat. We know that those babies at 15 weeks actually can open and close their hands. We know that they have developing lungs. And we know that those babies at 15 weeks can feel pain. And so when you talk, the difference between vaccine mandates and abortions is vaccines allow you to protect yourself. Abortions actually go in and kill other American babies. And let's just put this in perspective.
But Governor,
Chuck.
vaccines are not about yourself. Governor, hang on a minute. A vaccine is about protecting a larger community. A vaccine is about preventing spread. You could argue a vaccine mandate is a pro-life position.
You could certainly argue that, Chuck, but even if you listen to Dr. Fauci's interview with you earlier today, he made it very clear that the vaccine may not keep you from getting the virus. It may not keep you from spreading the virus, but it can keep you from ending up in the hospital. That's what's been proven during this Delta surge that we've seen in America, is that the virus is continuing to being spread even amongst those who are vaccinated. Conversely, when you're talking about the pro-life position of protecting unborn babies, let's put it also in perspective. The fact is that during this very horrible and challenging time since I was sworn into office in January of 2020, Chuck, we've had 800,000 American lives lost because of COVID. And my heart aches for every single one of those individuals that has died because of COVID. And over 10,000 Mississippians. My heart breaks for every single one of them. But since Roe was enacted, 62 million American babies have been aborted and have therefore been killed. And that's why I think it's very important that people like myself and others across this country stand up for those unborn children, because they don't have the ability to stand up for themselves.
Governor Tate Reeves, Republican of Mississippi, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us, sir. Thank you.
I don't know why they have to be American babies. They kill other American babies. There was some weird, like, American baby quotes in there, some, like, where you could take them out of context, and even in context, they don't even make a lot of sense. But the other thing, first, I did say, I was going to talk about the Ninth Amendment. If you have your Ninth Amendment, your U.S. Constitution handy, Tate Reeves there says, nowhere in the Constitution is there a right to abortion, or it's actually a right to privacy. It goes back to Griswold versus Connecticut, where you have a right to, first married couples have a right to make intimate decisions about things like reproduction without interference from the state, and then that got expanded to, like, every person has a right to control their body autonomy. That's part of the right to privacy, not in the Constitution. But what does the fundamental right to privacy and to control your body, that is something that people have understood for millennia, that especially when it gets taken away, that you have lost a fundamental right. And what does the Ninth Amendment say? Well, let's take a look at the Ninth Amendment. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So it specifically says, the Ninth Amendment, they put in there because people were worried that if they put a Bill of Rights in there, that people would say, well, if the right isn't listed, then it must not be a right. And so they specifically put in the Ninth Amendment, which says, if we didn't write it down, that doesn't mean that you don't have that right. So at least that part of Tate Reeves' argument was violative of what it says in the Ninth Amendment. That thing about European laws being more restrictive of abortion, and I don't know which countries he would, there's like Eastern Europe and but it has to do with a lot more religious influence on a lot of European countries. Some actually even have state religions. I don't know. I just watched the first season of The Crown, so I know about the weird divorce laws. And oh, there, Dash just walked by. But I'll talk about Dash in just a minute. After I finish criticizing Tate Reeves. The other thing about where Chuck Todd comes up with the great idea to say, well, you say for, my body, my choice for the vaccine. What about for women who, although he never even talked about women who have a right to control their own body. That never really, he didn't say that. And Tate Reeves gave the obvious response, which is, well, there's another life involved, American babies. They're killing other American babies, or whatever he said. And Chuck Todd sort of had a good reply about how COVID actually protects the community, but he never specifically said by not getting vaccinated, you may be killing someone, just like he didn't make it as clear cut as he could have, I guess. But anyway, that's that is the last clip, and it looks like Dash may be trying to. Oh. Hello. Oh, geez. So sorry about that. What just happened there is Dash tried to jump up and he pulled the cord on the. He tried to jump up and he pulled. You want to see? Dash is still alive. Dash is still alive. Here he is. For about 2 weeks, he didn't eat anything. I've got a live Dash clip. I didn't expect to have that, but he actually unplugged the camera there for a second. Sorry about that, but anyway, I'm gonna let him get down, and there's Sandy right there. So I guess that'll be the live Dash clip. I hope. Did that even come through? Did you even I'm trying to see. I'm getting. Oh, yep. Okay, good. So you got the live Dash clip. What I had planned to show you. And Dash and Sandy just walked out of the room. I had planned to show you Dash after not eating for about 2 weeks. We've been giving him an antibiotic and a steroid every day for a little over a week. It's kind of like a Hanukkah miracle. After 8 days of antibiotic and steroid, he started eating again. Last night, along the way he drank a lot of water, and he did lap up some milk. Every couple days he'd lick a few licks from the saucer. But last night he started. And Sandy wants to eat. But last night he actually ate some dry kibble. He drank some milk here. Earlier today, here is Dash eating some tuna. So anyway, I can't promise you. I still think at 16 and a half years old that Dash is still kind of in the end of life times. But eating is a good sign. And anyway, I just wanted to, I think I got that all in, but I'm having some issues here. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. I appreciate, I see Sexy Bob, Lulu Girl, Matthew, and Tom Trask all gave me super chat contributions, which I appreciate. I will be back next Monday, and at least for the next month of doing Mondays, and like I said, I'm going to reevaluate at the end of the year. Sorry the camera got cut off there, but I think I got everything working for the end of the show. And anyway, I hope you appreciate the time and effort I spent picking out the clips, giving my criticism and commentary. I'm like, ugh, look at all this cat hair. But I'm glad that Dash, I honestly did not think Dash was going to make it to this week, and he was just laying in this one. Anyway, but hopefully I'll have even more good news next week. Maybe have Sandy and Dash together. I guess we'll find out. And until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.